There was no discussion about it. There was no debate about it. It is just ongoing. And this is being repeated across America. One place after the other, after the other, after the other. So I'm saying, how is it on our watch? And by the way, these were not the numbers that existed 30 years ago. 30 years ago, you would not find more than about 10 or 12,000 people in our prisons and jails for African-American men. This number has skyrocketed. So is there some connection with this unemployment issue and all these men in jail? That somehow connect. Well, look, you could debate that one way or the other. Well, maybe that's a connection. The question is, so what do you do about it? That's been a trail that I have been on for my whole career. You know, when I was here in '75, there was still debate at Harvard, at the Ed School, of whether or not there was some genetic predisposition that African Americans had for some things not involving intellectual pursuits. And I was just out. I mean, there was a lot of outrage in the '70s over that kind of foolishness. But it was out there. There were scholars. They were saying it, and it had to be debated, and it had to be refuted. People were spending time and energy with that. But my life was really changed by a Harvard professor here when I was a graduate student. I was an undergraduate student. I was up at Bowdoin College, and I was a psych major. And I double majored psych and social. And I wanted to do this work since I was a child. And I really felt that psychology was part of it. That there was some underlying issue, some pathology I could figure out and how to help these kids to do well. And I was hoping to get a lot of, Freud and Jung, but it was none of that at Bowdoin. These guys were learning theorists, and that was all. And we did rat studies, and it was on and on and on. I wasn't really sure because I didn't see any practical application for any of this stuff, right? And so I graduate Bowdoin, I come to Harvard. They have a visiting professor. His name is Bruce Baker, and he's a behaviorist. And I go in, and he's saying that there are things that cause people to behave in certain ways that can be manipulated. And if you manipulate them correctly, you can change a person's behavior from one thing to the next. And he had a room full of Harvard students. They were sitting there, and he was up talking about reinforcement schedules and going on. And everybody's eyes glazed over. He said, I had spent 4 years learning about this stuff, and I never knew you could use it. So he was up there talking. And as he began to talk, my hand went up. I said, Dr. Baker, isn't it true that if we change that reinforcement schedule to an intermittent reinforcement schedule, we would make that behavior even stronger? And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and it was like love. Here's a guy who understands me. So I take Dr. Baker's class. He and I are in the same place. Because, see, I think this is an answer. Now I'm looking for an answer. I think here's a guy who got an answer. Dr. Baker's basic belief was all children could learn. We simply had to figure out how to motivate children. And things that motivated children change from one child to the next. And if you were a scientist, your job was to figure out what the motivator was for this child and how you could use that to change that child's behavior, to get children to do positive things. Now, he wasn't doing this with the average population of students. He was focused on the most troubled students that we could find. We were looking for children with serious medical diagnoses, schizophrenia, autism, all kinds of maladaptive, acting out behavior. We wanted the worst kids we could find in 3 states. We were looking in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and I think it was Maine was the 3rd state. And we were going out, and you had to interview to come to our camp. Now, we were getting kids who could not be educated. So a kid could be in a classroom, they could not come to our camp. These were kids that there were no education options for them. And we were going to give their parents 7 weeks sleepaway camp in Center Ossipee, New Hampshire. Now you have to imagine, you're a parent. You have a child. This kid is so bad, no school will keep them. Right? You can't leave the kid with the neighbors. You can't leave the kid with your friends. Nobody wants this kid is chained to you by your hip. And here we go saying we will give you 7 weeks in the summer of freedom We had a line of parents out there trying to get these kids in now. So there was an interview. Kids would come in, we'd be sitting at the table, the parents and child would be at the table, we'd come in and say, you know, we see you have the child, we'd ask a few questions. If a parent and the child successfully got through that interview, they could not come to our meeting. They could not. But the parent who sat there, she said, oh, this Jose, he's really a very nice kid. And Jose would knock the water over. Jose, don't do that. And Jose would smack her hand. Oh, he's usually not like this. And he grabs her hand. And she's thinking, Jose, you're in. Let's go. The fascinating thing about Dr. Baker was that he actually knew what he was talking about. We would get a kid, you'd sit there, he said the underlying philosophy of behaviorism, right? He laid all of that out and said it'll work with anybody, any child with any issue at all. We'd have a kid no one could work with. He'd walk into the room, you say, stand back. And everybody would move back and we would watch him work. He could make it work. The power of that. You understand the power of that? The power of watching a bunch of folks fail and a person walking in and say, stand back, watch me. Every single child. There was not a child I had ever seen him with that he could not reach. I said, okay, there's something here. So we take these kids, we take them away to the woods, we put them on behavior programs. Now this is the time, you know, this is really different. In 1975, they were putting children with Down syndrome in state hospitals never to be let out again. They just assumed you couldn't teach these kids. There was just a whole group of kids that were locked up in institutions that people said you simply, kids who had hydrocephalic kids, lock them up. They would not even try, no one could teach them, they just said there's nothing you could do. The movement to get these kids out of the institutions and into the classroom was happening right then and right there. We were just right there as part of that, doing some of the research around what it would take. So, 5 weeks into the summer program, we'd invite parents in. The same experience for every single parent. Parent would come up there and we'd say, once you come see your child, we're going to look through a one-way mirror, but we don't want the child to see you. And we'll let you see what your child is doing. Children who had never sat down, had never listened, had never picked up a pencil. Parents would walk in, they would see their kids sitting at a table, paying attention to an adult, and the parents would all break down in tears. Never thought they'd ever see it again. Some of the kids were 12, some of the kids were 9, some of the kids were 15. Parents thought I'd never see the day. I left there and went to New York to get to work with kids. And I saw perfectly normal. Now, see, people say normal. No, I'm talking average. See, people talk hyperactivity, you know, they give all these kids medicine. Most teachers have never really seen a hyperactive child. Not a really diagnosed hyperactive. Now, we had some hyperactive children that literally could not hold a thought in their mind for more than 4 to 5 seconds. That was your time span to connect with that child. You show me any kid, I give him a video game, that kid, that child is not hyperactive. I don't know that he sit down, he'll pay attention, watch TV, that child's not hyperactive. I can deal with that child. I don't need medicine. We took all of our kids off every medicine. The only thing they were allowed to have was if the kid had seizures, we'd let them keep their seizure medicine. All the other stuff, we didn't need that stuff. We could get those kids. But this was hard work. That's when I found out teaching is hard work. Right? See, I'm telling you, this stuff was hard work. We want to see that every single kid, every one of those kids, you had to figure out where were they and where were you taking them, and that was the issue. Now, we weren't getting all of our kids so they were catching up on grade levels, but all those kids could learn, and all of them began to learn, and we had kids who were diagnosed with autism, which at that point was like a terminal diagnosis. Right now, people, autism is a word that's used up. At this point in time, no one knew how to reach these kids at all. But we could get those kids so they could actually into sheltered workshops and begin to learn how to do work that, in fact, you know, we were sorting things in different bins and stuff like that. So I was convinced that there's absolutely no reason. When people talk, you hear all this stuff, well, every child can learn, every child can learn. Oh no, I really believed every child could learn. The only question was that some kids, you didn't have to work so hard, and some kids you had to work really, really hard. But that was all up to the adults. That had nothing to do with the kids whatsoever. So, early on in my career, I'm thinking about this. I get to the Harlem Children's Zone in 1983. We're working with a small population of kids. And by 86, 87, I realized for every child I'm helping, there are 20, 30 that we're not helping. They just don't get to us. I'm starting to get these long lines of folks waiting to get into the program. I thought, I don't think we're winning this thing. I just don't think we're winning. So about 7 years ago, we began to think about what would it look like to win. We decided we were going to focus on a targeted geographic area, and this is why. We've known, well, I first saw research probably around 86, 87, that 60% of all of the folks in the state prison system come from 7 community districts in New York. And if you live in New York City, you would know the districts. You and I know. Bed-Stuy, Central Harlem, East Harlem, South Bronx, Southeast Jamaica, Queens. That had been the case forever. So my thought was, you don't have to do a research project to figure out where, right, folks were in trouble. I mean, it's going on forever. So this was just simply, if we know these communities are producing these kinds of outcomes for its kids, let's just go into those communities and straighten this out. Right? It's not like a big deal. So what is it about those communities that produce these kinds of outcomes? Well, we found that nothing was working. Schools weren't working. Health system wasn't working. The criminal justice system wasn't working. There wasn't substance abuse treatment. That these kids faced every possible barrier, literally from birth. When we began to say, well, what is it that you should do? You have to do everything. So you can't do everything. First problem. Right there. No, if you have to do everything, then you have to do everything. You can't tell me you have to do everything and say, well, you can't do everything. Well, why not? They said, well, no. That's what they say. Well, you can't do everything, Jeff. It's not realistic. I said, well, I'm talking about being realistic. Listen, let's say if it takes everything, then let's figure out what everything means. So the only question is, you can do everything for one kid. So the question is, are we dealing with one kid? Are we dealing with 20 kids? What's the number? We came up with a number. We said our first starting number is going to be 3,000 kids. We said we're going to go in an area, we're going to carve an area out, and for those kids, we were going to do everything. Had some folk who sort of saw the numbers, how this thing was going to go. This thing was going to cost. They said, well, Jeff, you're never going to pull that off. You see the number? I said, look, I'm not going to worry about that right now. Let's just see if we can figure out what to do. So this is what we did. We focused on an area, started with 22 square blocks. We did 4 big things. We first focused on rebuilding community. Why? Community matters. Just matters. You cannot have kids growing up where the first time they walk outside their door, they realize they're in a place that people wouldn't be caught dead. You could just look around. You know, look, you don't have to, again, do the research as you want, but I could drop you in places in this country you could take one look and say, this is not a good place. Now, you don't have to go say, why would you say that? That's not a nice thing. Don't be prejudicial about it. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's a response. Oh, no, you know that. No. Go right in there and you know this is not a safe, I do not want to be here. This is not a good place. And kids know it too. So if you have places like playgrounds that are filled with glass, violence, children can't play. What does that do to the families in that community? Well, it means that those kids can't go outside. Now, if you're a mother, you got 3 kids, you're locked up in an apartment, little tiny apartment in Harlem, playgrounds don't work. Where do you spend your interaction with your children? Stop, don't jump on there, come on, no, you may not, but do not throw that ball in. It is a constant series of no's and don'ts. Apartments aren't made as playgrounds. So you have playground right down the block. There's guys in there selling drugs. The place is filthy. The equipment is cement. The kids fall, they break their arms and legs. No, we can do something about that. We can do something about that. That's not hard. We began to form block associations. We began to form tenant associations. We began to train a group of adults to focus on their areas. And we started with 1 building and then 1 block. And the funny thing is, once we got 1 block done, people get that. See, people come in now, these places, people are trying to save Harlem for, 50 years. Came in the 50s, they came in the 60s, and here I come, in the 2000s. I'm going to say, oh yeah, Jeff's going to say what's not sure. Once you had a block that people could see, they say, oh yeah, 119th Street, oh, you had something to do with 119th Street, what happened over there? That place looks all right. Suddenly we didn't have to do a lot of convincing folks what this thing took. They said, we want that same thing happening on our block. So we got these leaders, we got corporations to come in and volunteer. They volunteer doing projects. We cleaned up stuff, we painted stuff, we planted flowers. Look, when we did this, we actually charted it on the wall, everything we did to rebuild the community. I said, 5 years from now, people will come here and they'll say, what's Jeff talking about? This place looks wonderful. I don't get it. And that's what people say when they come in there. Wow, look at the real estate market. Place is unbelievable. We can show you where we began to physically change what that place looked like. But we did it by building leadership in local residents. We actually sent them away to programs that taught them leadership skills. One of the problems in communities like Harlem is that the people who care often don't have the skills necessary to do the work. So they want to run a meeting, but no one's ever taught them how to run an effective meeting. And you walk in one of those meetings, the meeting starts late, they never stay on top of it, there's no agenda, there's no minutes from the last meeting, the same person over there is talking about the same thing that has nothing to do with the meeting. After a while, after 3 months of that, all the good people stop going and only the crazies come. And believe me, there's a group of crazies that love these meetings. And they just can't wait. And so, then you wonder why nothing happened. But we had to actually begin to teach people real skills. We had to teach them, you have to have an agenda. Meeting starts at 8, meeting starts at 8. I don't care if there's 2 people, meeting starts at 8. Meeting's over at 9, meeting's over at 9. We're not going to, don't at 8:59, you come up with a prayer. I want to talk about abortion. I know, the meeting is over. We're not getting into that issue right now. When you began to ask people to really play a role in community, this is not some idea, oh no, Miss Jones is able to go. No, Miss Jones got 3 kids, she's struggling. She does care about her community. But boy, she needs some training, she needs some support. We gave people computers, we gave them printers. So you don't have to go figure out, you want to get something done, you have to go beg and borrow someone to go and figure out. No, you do it right in your home, so you get the leaflets done, you get the stuff out so that leaders begin to be created from local communities. Now, while we were doing that, we did this second thing, which was to create best practice programs at each developmental stage of a child's life. Now, I will tell you, simple concept, there's no community that I have been in like Harlem with children are failing where it exists. We start from birth, something we call baby college, for parents. Just teaches them what we know about raising children and brain development. Our parents don't hear that stuff. They just simply don't know. This is what we know. If you were a lousy parent, your child is probably not going to do well, and your child is probably going to be a lousy parent. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that maybe someone had to do something with that parent so they learn some skills about parenting. There is a whole science on this is a fairly young group. When you have a child and you have a college education, you begin to realize one of the reasons you got an education is that you could learn stuff about something you know nothing about. And you will not hear anything. Someone says, oh, your child is so-and-so, you will be on the internet, you will be looking up stuff, you will be trying to figure out what does this mean, what should I be doing, if you have not had that set of skills, you just simply don't know. And what you know is what you were taught. And if it was wrong, you just continue to repeat it. So we start with baby college. We have a 4-year-old program, best practice. You know what best practice is? Best practice means there's some scientific evidence that the program works if it's followed in a loyal way. Meaning that if I'm doing a program for 4-year-olds, I want to say, who has a program for 4-year-olds where they have shown that these kids have advanced? And if I can be faithful to their program description, then I have some reason to suspect my own kids are going to advance. The problem with best practice is that it costs money, because it talks about qualifications of staff and ratios of students to staff. poor communities, you never get best practice. You get mediocre practice. You get the best. What was the best we could do? No, we couldn't get the master's level person. We got someone with a BA. That's the best we could do. I have not found one shred of evidence anywhere that mediocre practice actually produces positive results. I've just never seen it. You don't have to, don't do that, all of that. Get rid of all that stuff. You can do this like this, and it produces results just fine. There's no evidence of that at all. So the moment you change that program from best practice and you become mediocre, there's not one shred of evidence that it works anymore. Now, where does all the mediocre practice happen? In the poor community. In the poor community. That's where it's no longer best practice. So we got a 4-year-old program. We have student-teacher ratio 4:1. Master's level teachers. The program starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, ends at 5:45 in the evening, goes 11 months a year. Guess what happens? 100% of our children, not 85, not 92, not 90, 100% of our children enter kindergarten ready to learn. That when you begin to say, what are the skills the child needs for kindergarten? We teach our kids in 3 languages, French, English, and Spanish. They know how to count in 3 languages. They know their alphabets in 3 languages. They know their days of the week in 3 languages. They know the months of the year in 3 languages. And you know why? Because if you can do it in 3 languages, there's absolutely no reason any 5-year-old should be walking into kindergarten not knowing it in their native language or knowing it in the language they're going to be taught. There's just no reason. I don't care if the kid's bilingual. There's no reason. You can teach